This is a dangerous precedent that is being set for the video games industry and video games journalism as a whole, and a lot of people are celebrating it. One of the newest games to come out recently is a game called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And that game is polarizing as is, but I want to talk about one specific aspect of it. Their apparent decision to refuse to give IGN review codes for that game. As Tom Marks on Twitter pointed out, who is, by the way, the executive reviews editor for IGN. And I'll leave a link to his tweet in the description down below, but reactions to this have really come into one of two categories I tend to find. Either people predicting that the game is going to suck, and that they don't have the confidence to give IGN of all publications a review copy, which may speak to the quality of the game itself, or people saying, well, you deserve it, and rejoicing and celebrating at someone sticking it to IGN. Now, I don't want to talk too much about this specific case exactly. I want to talk about the possible precedent that it could set down the line, and how that relates to Axe's journalism, and what that really all talks about and says about the state of video games journalism. Because let's be honest, it's kind of a sty right now, and has been so for quite a while at this point. In my opinion, games journalism should exist to inform the consumer, to inform them about the state of the game, how it operates, how it plays, how it performs on each system that it comes out for, and to give the consumer as much knowledgeable and usable and actionable knowledge and feedback that they can, so that the consumer can make an informed purchasing decision. For games journalism, I believe that is pivotal. That should be the Polaris star that everyone strives for. All the while acknowledging that while bias may exist, we can do our best to minimize it to our best capabilities, and if we are unable to do so, to at least disclose said biases beforehand, so that the consumer/reader are able to understand that and use that information at their own discretion. Because the end goal should be informing the consumer. But for quite a while, games journalism has at least given off the appearance and air and vibe that their main methodology is to, well, gather clicks. It is a click-central internet that we occupy, that we live in. Clicks generate everything from clickbait to having outrageous takes that clearly not a lot of people will agree with, but because of that disagreement, they'll click on the article, thereby getting an ad. Alongside the clickapalooza that games journalism has become in recent years, not even recent years, for quite a while at this point, you also have an aspect of games journalism that feels holier than thou. Not everyone, mind you, but every now and then you'll see a take from one of these outlets or a journalist from one of these outlets that feels as if they're trying to preach down to not only the games themselves but also the consumer, to try and pretend that they're on some kind of higher moral high ground and treat and demonize an aspect or component of a game or a series of games to try and make the consumer feel bad for enjoying them, when really mainly most people don't care. I hesitate to call it faux outrage, but I really can't think of any other way to describe it. As if to shift the conversation away from the game itself and more to one aspect of the game that is kind of taken out of context, or that most consumers just don't really care about. They want to know if the game is good, and it's almost shifting the conversation. Well, not almost, it's shifting the conversation away from actionable intelligence that the consumer can actually get, to focus in on this kind of tripe that really no one cares about. And when you have games journalism en masse over years and years kind of tread towards this, and these ideas and these principles, and this policy, you can kind of understand why people would be at least of the opinion to have a knee-jerk reaction of positivity whenever a company may decide not to give one of these outlets review copies. Because games journalism has been demonized to the point to where this has become, well, kind of accepted for a lot of people. And while I can understand the pessimism a lot of people have for games journalism nowadays, I also think that it creates a dangerous precedent in regards to access journalism. Now, you can Google access journalism yourself to find out exactly what it is, but it's essentially outlets vying for access instead of upholding journalistic integrity as their primary modus operandi. You may give more favorable coverage than you really should because you want to make sure that down the line you'll get coverage again. And the leading theory in regards to why IGN was denied access or review copies for Suicide Squad is based on prior negative coverage surrounding the game and articles stating that they didn't enjoy the game. Now, you may hear that and say, well, it's obvious why Suicide Squad wouldn't want to give IGN review copies, because if they don't already enjoy the game, they are likely to give a negative review, and what outlet or what game company would want to just guarantee a negative review for their own game? And you can hear that, and that can make complete sense to you. However, it can also lead to a dangerous precedent of games journalism en masse starting to trend towards the idea that they have to be far more positive than they even are already for some of these games. Focus less on the things that creators, not even creators, but consumers and customers really care about, and to shy away from journalistic integrity all in the service of access journalism to ensure future access. Because if they don't have access to begin with, then people stop coming to these sites, drawing down engagement, reducing that ad revenue coming in. Sponsors take a look at that, notice less people are coming in, and then they may get less favorable deals in the future. It's all about rippling effects down the line. Now you may be saying, well, Jmulls, why should I care about the health and well-being of IGN? Or any of these other games journalism websites and outlets? And I can understand that, and honestly, there's like two thoughts going on in my mind right now. One, that you should, and then you should only care about getting a good game, but the other part of me saying, well, we can admit that games journalism is not in the best of spaces right now, but does that mean we should abandon the idea wholeheartedly? I think games journalism is like any other online outlet that is undergoing extensive, massive reform and change. And over the last few years or so, honestly decade, we have seen a lot of games journalism and focus and coverage for video games shift from traditional outlets more towards, say, YouTubers and streamers. And now even like short creators like YouTube Shorts or TikTok. Gone are the days where you need to get a magazine to read a review to find out about the qualities of a game before you buy it. Nowadays, you can just go on, watch the entire game in its entirety if you really want to, whether it be through streams or videos or whatever. You can gain as much information and knowledge as you can without the middleman. You can just watch the game being played, make a judgment for yourself if this looks fun and enjoyable to you, and then go out and buy it, or play it, or rent it, or whatever. The simple reality of games journalism is that trust in it has eroded so drastically over the years, but it's not within a vacuum. It's also coinciding with this rapid transformation of the industry at large. Realistically speaking, who reads reviews anymore? A lot of the times I tend to find, or at least in my experience, which could be anecdotal, and I'm willing to admit that, most people watch reviews. They watch a video of a review. Hell, even IGN makes video reviews now. It's not just go to an article and read it. You can go to the video and watch it. Games journalism is always evolving and trying to shift and fit according to the times. But I think there's also a lot of information surrounding video games that is important for consumers to know, such as how does the game perform? This is especially important for, say, PC gamers, which is what I categorize myself as. I want to know how the game is going to run on my machine. I want to know how the game is going to run overall. What kind of options does it have? If it's a first-person shooter or a game in first person, does it have an FOV slider? How much frame rate can the game put out? Is it locked to 60 FPS? Is it, by God, Shudder and Fear locked to 30 for some reason? Does the DualSense controller have native support on PC for these games? Can I mod the game? Does the game have any massive bugs or glitches that I should be informed about so that I can either work around or base my purchase decision off that idea? There's a lot of information that requires extensive testing that games journalism can and has provided for quite a while. Digital Foundry is one of the main ideas behind this, where they'll give you extensive tests for how these games run. That is actionable, important information for the consumer to have, at least at their disposal. Not everyone will want to make use of this resource, but that resource should be available. And I think it is kind of a double-edged sword where if a game decides not to give one of these popular outlets access to their game, you will have some people that'll inevitably celebrate that and say that they're sticking it to the man, but also you'll have the idea in the back of people's minds where it's like, okay, well, are you just not confident in your own product? Like, say, if an outlet doesn't want to give Digital Foundry or another outlet that specializes in the performance of a game, and they don't want to give that outlet coverage or access to the game pre-launch, what would that tell me, the consumer? That would just say, prepare for the worst. It's probably going to run like cheeks. Because if you were proud of your product and you were confident in what you were pushing out the door, then you wouldn't be scared to give these outlets that copy. And I think this kind of doubles back to the whole idea of access journalism and how much of a slippery slope that can be. Now, Tom Marks on Twitter, to be fair to him, and to IGN, and I'll quote here, "To be clear, this sort of situation is exceedingly rare in my experience." Mind you, he's the executive reviews editor for games at IGN, and back to the quote, "and it's not going to change anything about how we cover games, Suicide Squad or beyond." And he may genuinely believe that and try to enact that in the future. But what message does this send also to other games journalism outlets? It's not like this will all happen all at once, but it could be a slippery slope that over time can erode and kind of force the hands of a lot of these journalists and these outlets to try and at least come up with more positive coverage to ensure that they gain coverage in the future. Because without access, then games journalism kind of loses a lot of purpose. Why do a lot of games journalists gain access to games before launch? It's so that they can play the games themselves, gather this actionable intelligence for the consumers, and convey it before release for these games. And if the game is good, that generates a lot of hype and positivity surrounding the game. And also, when the game comes out, consumers have at their disposal a wealth of resources at their disposal about the game. That, in my opinion, in an idealistic scenario, is a good thing. A more informed consumer is generally a better thing, in my opinion. But when outlets are denied coverage, it allows only the positive ones to really be heard at launch, and everyone else has to play catch-up. Look at what happened with Starfield, and how higher that game was viewed, at least on launch, compared to nowadays, en masse. Look at review scores, look at Metacritic, look at all these things. The Steam review scores, all of these things. These numbers generally trended downwards a month or two after launch of Starfield, because we had the same exact conversation back when Starfield was coming out. It is a dangerous precedent to set because it can potentially misinform and mislead consumers. Now, could consumers overcome this by just checking more and more outlets? Yes. Doing even more due diligence, but I don't think the onus should be on the consumer here. People are busy, people are tired, they just want to play a good game. They shouldn't have to jump through 10 metaphorical hoops and loops just to try and find some good old-fashioned coverage surrounding a game, such as how long is the game, what kind of accessibility options does the game have, how does the game perform, etc., etc. Is it any wonder why a lot of people en masse have migrated away from traditional journalism for video games in lieu and in favor of the Twitch streamer and YouTube meta? Because again, why have this middleman to begin with when you can just go to the source itself, watch gameplay of this game, and make your own opinion? People just want to find if the game is good or not. They want to know if they would enjoy the game personally or not, and if the game is worthy of investing time and money in. That's what they want to know. That's what they care about en masse. And I've talked about it before with Palworld, how Palworld has all of these controversies surrounding it, but it's still breaking records because most people simply don't care. They want a good game, and Palworld, for whatever accusation you want to throw at it, in my opinion and in my experience and in a lot of other people's, is a good game, is well priced, reasonable, and doesn't go out to exploit the consumer with a whole bunch of microtransactions and apologia to try and rip core essential features out of the game to be sold back to you piecemeal. I think it's easy to write off this one instance of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and IGN as just, haha, games journalism at it again, right? It's really easy to do that, and I can understand that knee-jerk reaction. What I'm trying to say is, I think this is a result of years of a downward trend for games journalism on the whole, an erosion of trust in both games journalism and like that whole kind of sector of the industry. But also in the last few years, people just en masse really wanting good games and not caring about what the controversies surrounding the games are. And when a lot of coverage surrounding these games are about those controversies, a lot of people just get turned off by that, tune it out, because they want to focus in on having a good time and enjoying the game. And that's understandable. I think there are times when games need to be dragged over the coals, like for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, with putting New Game Plus and Deluxe and Legendary Editions. That is something that deserves to be talked about, ridiculed, and scorned. It's a god-awful policy that can set a god-awful precedent. All these microtransactions, battle passes, loot boxes, whatever, being inserted into these games, core components being ripped out to be sold back to you piecemeal, taking the heart and soul out of a lot of these games, ruining the game's aesthetic just so they can insert random goofy skins that don't belong in the aesthetic of the game. This is stuff that deserves to be talked about. But just because you talk about it, you don't deserve to be listened to. I don't deserve to be listened to. It falls on the consumer and whether or not they want to listen to it, and the market on the whole if they want to respond to it. But for me, I value more actionable discussion that affects the consumer directly. How does a game run? How does it operate? Is it fun? How are boss fights treated? How is progression? How is gameplay? What are the accessibility options? Give me the information for the consumer, or that as a consumer that I can make the most informed purchasing decision for myself. Opinion pieces and all that are good, but they shouldn't detract from informing the consumer first and foremost. Access journalism is a massive issue that has potential ramifications for the entire industry not even down the line right now. But it's a conversation a lot of people don't want to have because their trust in games journalism to begin with is eroded to the point of pretty much nothing. I think games journalism on the whole needs to have a massive interior or internal look at itself and try and reevaluate its goals and its endeavors, and the methodologies in which they try and achieve those goals. There is clearly a massive disconnect between games journalism and the consumer base, a gap that needs to be bridged. Because again, more information, more knowledgeable, actionable information for the consumer is a good thing. But we have to get there first. Otherwise, more and more companies will start to engage in access journalistic behavior. And while it may not result in massive ramifications in the immediate future, all of these steps eventually may add up to a mile. Take a little bit here, take a little bit there, and then eventually they have an entire mile or an acre all to their self. That is a potentiality and a future that should be avoided, should be advocated against, and prevented. So with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below with what game you thought got the bad end of the stick in regards to games journalism en masse, that you thought didn't deserve the critique, or that you thought deserved more critique than it ended up getting. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Stay safe, have a great day. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future, and to support the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.